All right, guys, welcome back to the Fearless Podcast. Today I have the head coach of Prairie Ridge Baseball, Glen Pecoraro. So he has been in high school baseball for 35 years, and out of those 35 years, for 25, he has been the head coach at Prairie Ridge. So, Coach Peck, I'm just going to have you take it away, give yourself an introduction to our listeners and our guests, and we'll go from there.
Okay, good morning, guys. I'm Glen Pecoraro. I've been at Prairie Ridge High School for 28 years. 25 of those I've been a head coach. I was an assistant coach at Marion Central Catholic in a small area near us, Woodstock, Illinois. I was an assistant at Crystal Lake Central High School, which is right near us, and we're kind of on the north side of Crystal Lake, Prairie Ridge High School. So I've been the head coach here for 25 total years, 35 years coaching high school baseball.
Awesome. So one of the first questions I kind of wanted to dive into is, for the listeners at home, I grew up in Illinois and I played for Coach Peck for a long time. One thing I really wanted to touch on is recruiting, because that seems to be a big thing in the game right now. Is kids are, instead of sort of being a little more, at least here in California compared to out in Illinois, I don't know how it is right now. But in California, it seems that kids are on the D1 or die route. If I don't play Division One, I'm a failure. I'm not going to play D2, D3, or NAIA or go to a JUCO and develop. Have you seen that same kind of process with kids now, and how that's shifted from, when I was there in 2014, 2016, and are kids starting to kind of go along that route, or has it stayed pretty consistent in Illinois?
Well, I tell my kids the opposite. Like, you go where they want you. I don't care if it's Division One, Division Two, NAIA, Division Three, junior college. I always tell them whoever shows the most interest and that school fits your academic needs, that's where you need to go. Especially now with the portal, where there's 5,000 kids in the portal, and all these Division One schools can pick and choose who they need or who they want. Um, I think a high school kid, unless he's a blue chipper and really something special, I believe their best route, if they want to ultimately get to the Division One level, is junior college. You play 2 years of junior college, you play a higher caliber of baseball. You got 2 more years to get bigger and stronger. And guys are going to get bigger and stronger later. So those 2 years in junior college, I think, are valuable. So I push junior. I was a junior college guy, so I always push junior college. We have strong junior college baseball here, just like you do in California. I know that baseball there is tremendous. But Illinois is pretty good. I think we're number 4 or 5 on the list in the country every year. In the area we're in, the Chicago suburban areas, good baseball, a lot of good high schools. But I tell them, you go where they want you. So I don't think our kids have that mentality. Now, every once in a while, we'll have an individual that's a Division One or bust kid, and I just tell them, hey, you may go there and never play. And especially now with the portal, that's changed everything. With the money they're getting now in the portal, I think it's really difficult for a high school kid, unless they're a freak, unless they're just a physical specimen, to go to the Division One level and compete right away. So in my mind, I think if Division One's the goal, I think you go 2 years of junior college. If you just want to play college baseball, I always tell them, you go where they want you the most, and that's your best bet. That's your best bet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it brings up a really good point is, do you want to play college baseball or watch college
Right.
baseball? Because a lot of times these kids, they'll go to the D1 schools and they'll get redshirted, and it can go one of two ways. Maybe the next year they come back out and they have an opportunity to ball out and have some time on the field, or
Yep.
they might redshirt them and just go, all right, we're going to help you get to another school, whether that be another Division One or hop into a JUCO and develop from there.
Right.
So that can be a tough one. Is, do the high school boys kind of understand, well, I'm going to, let's say, they want to go to UCLA. Do they understand that, as a freshman, oftentimes you're not going to get a lot of playing time. Pitchers maybe a little bit more so than position players.
Sure.
But is that a conversation you have with them often, where it's like there's a difference between you going to the school and watching versus you going to the school and playing?
Sure, absolutely. I've tried to have that conversation, at least once or twice a month minimum during our off-season workouts. But definitely, we just had a left-hander that I'm really high on that just signed with a Division II school. And he's going to be a two-way guy where I think he can make an impact both as a position player and as a pitcher at a Division I school up in Wisconsin, who I think is a perfect place for him. And then we have another left-hander whose stuff is pretty good. They're both pretty comparable. The one throws a little harder, that just signed with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I think, and by no means is Milwaukee a top-level Division I program, but they still have the ability to go in the portal and get kids, where I think he's probably going to struggle for a year or two. And when I talked to him about that, his response to me is, Coach, I want to be challenged. I want to put in that situation where I have to push myself. And, when he said that, I said, okay, then you're going to the right place. Just know that you're going to be probably behind the eight ball and behind some 21, 22-year-olds that they just picked up from the portal that are 3 or 4 years ahead of you. But he wanted that challenge, so God bless him.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a good challenge to have. Go to the D1 level, and I'm going to go compete.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just like, and I had my own issues when I went to the D3 level at North Central. Was I thought I should get playing time off the bat, so it should tell, freshmen that there is a period of time in college baseball where you have to prove yourself. It's
Absolutely.
just the same as when you get up to varsity. You're not always going to be the guy right away, regardless of what position you play.
Right.
And when I came up to varsity, obviously we had 5 starters and 4 were Division I, and I was the only one going Division III. And I was at the end of the rotation my junior year, and I had to earn that spot to be the 3rd guy out of 5 my
Yep.
senior year. And I mean, that was one of the best, I think, high school rotations that was in the conference for a long
Man,
time.
it was a good group. I love that group. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, even Ethan, who I've stayed in a little bit of contact with him, I mean, he's doing it in the minor leagues. So
Yes.
it goes to show you, how much you stick with it. Um, Now, in your program versus, what I've seen in a lot of other high school programs, and I'm not going to, say any names of high schools, it seems like I've seen a lot of teams who have strayed away from having group lifting or, any kind of training.
Yeah.
So what brought that to Prairie Ridge's program? What brought that to you where it was like, okay, we're going to lift 2 to 3 days a week as a team versus these other schools that go, oh, I just trust you have a guy, or I don't believe in weightlifting or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The people that say I don't believe in weightlifting, man, they're living in the 70s or 80s. They're way behind the times, because I don't know how you can compete today over time if you're not in the weight room. I mean, that's in all high school sports. I mean, I had this conversation with our volleyball coach the other day, who said she didn't want her girls lifting in season. And my response was, you think they're lifting at Penn State, where you went to school? And she was a national champion. I guarantee they're lifting in season in 90% or more of college athletics. I don't care if it's Division III, Division II, Division I. I go, man, just look up the data, the new research that's out there. You have to be lifting in season. We've always done it that way. I've been a fan of the weight room and our guys sacrificing and lifting together. Whether we're good or we're average or not very good, I want those guys in that weight room, throwing weights around, pushing their teammates, sacrificing for each other, because I feel like it's the right way to do it. And it's the right way to build a culture and build a team setting. And every year we compete against teams that don't do that, like you're saying, and they let their kids go and do whatever they want. They work with their personal trainers. They have their personal strength coaches, personally, their pitching coaches, whatever. And they're good. They got friggin' talent, and they're good every year, and they're tough to beat. But I just don't think that's the right way to build an organization. I don't care what the organization is. I think you need those guys training and sacrificing together. I think that's the right way to do it, no matter what the mission or the objective is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. When you create a culture amongst teammates for the entire year, especially in the Midwest where you can't play year round like you do here
Right.
out in the West Coast, you have to have some kind of competitive environment with your team where you're at least competing with yourself, with your own teammates,
Exactly.
not necessarily against other teams, because in the West Coast, they're going to play spring season, they're going to play summer, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're going to play fall. And sometimes they're playing on 2 or 3 teams in the fall, and then they hop right back into spring ball. So, in your opinion, do you think that it's better and more advantageous for some of these West Coast kids to be playing year round
I,
versus the Midwest, where they because in the Midwest we had an off season, like a true off season. We were able to
yeah.
have a decent shutdown, a good ramp up.
Yep.
I was on a podcast with a guy named Tanner Pruitt. He's a really great pitching coach, and my take on it was I thought that the Midwest had it better because they had the ability to learn to compete over time. And I would agree with that, that those kids probably have a better opportunity to learn to compete more
Hmm.
because they don't stop playing.
Yeah.
But I also think that when you don't stop playing, your injury risk goes up. You get burnt out mentally, physically. What are your thoughts on Midwest versus West Coast when it comes to the fall and winter time?
Well, I've never, coached or been in the Midwest. I know it's a different animal, but I mean, I just feel like when you play that many games, you play spring season for us, that's 35 to 40 games. These guys play high level travel. Our better players, they're playing 50 to 60 games in these, higher level tournaments. They're real good tournaments in the Midwest. And then you're playing a fall season of 20 to 30 games. When is enough enough? When are you going to take that time to work on your skills, to long toss, to get stronger? I think those games, because you're playing so many of them, become meaningless. And you're just out there playing another game. Winning and losing really doesn't matter. You're just playing another game to get your work in. I don't think then those games are significant. I think sometimes your time is better spent working on your individual game, your strength, your speed. I think sometimes we play too many games, and I don't push fall ball. Here's what I tell my guys on fall ball: if you didn't play, if you didn't have, you weren't in the regular rotation in the spring and summer, and you didn't get a ton of innings, absolutely, maybe you need to get more innings. Play fall ball. Or if you were a reserve guy and weren't a regular starter and you didn't get a lot of at bats in the spring or summer, absolutely get more at bats, play fall ball. But I think sometimes these guys that are regular starters that play consistently, I love that fall for these guys to work on their individual game. And for me, I want the older guys, the juniors and seniors. I don't know how you do it in California, but I want the junior seniors right alongside those freshmen and sophomores that are just incoming. I want them working with them in the weight room, teaching them or help teach them the lifts, help teach them the skill we want in the infield, the outfield, bullpen, whatever. I want those younger guys working right alongside those older guys. And if those older guys are always playing, then it's difficult for those guys to have that chance.
Yeah. No, I think that is important because you learn to mature that way too. And you get to see, I always tell guys if you watch, if you go to the game before the game starts, you watch the relievers playing catch or starters prior to their next start.
Yes.
No one's speaking when they play catch. They're all working on something. Maybe a couple words here and there, but the details are so important. I think as you get up into high school and you start to realize how important it is to play well, to take the details seriously, to do all the little things,
Yep.
you start to become that guy who, when you're playing catch, you're far more focused, right? You're working on different things, whether you be an infielder, outfielder, pitcher.
Yep.
Pitchers are going to work on spinning the ball a little more. Infield, outfield, I mean, they could work on, really anything through
Yep.
that in their catch play.
Love
They could work
skill.
on relays if they wanted to.
Love skill, relays. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if you put younger people in that environment, they start to realize that, catch time isn't just talk
Yep.
time. Like that's
Exactly.
where you are fine tuning things for when you get into team defense. You feel good, and then you're
Yep.
just playing catch through team defense.
Have those conversations a lot because you'll get your kids that just, I always say to them, you've heard me say it. Are we playing catch to get loose or are we playing catch to work on catch, to work on our skill, to work on our feet? When we play pitch catch, are we throwing to a location? Are we working on spinning the ball? So I have those conversations all the time. Are you playing catch just to get loose or are you playing catch to make it meaningful?
Yeah, no, and that's a good point.
Yeah.
There was another thing that I wanted to bring up that is a little controversial because in Illinois, I believe they either are thinking about or they did pass a law or rule that states kids who play on some kind of an all-star team, something where they're higher level, they can't compete in that season that they did that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that kind of thing?
Yeah, that was a big thing here in beginning of August that would going jumping, blowing up all over Twitter. I guess the IHSA had a rule that kids could not play in any kind of all-star games once we got into, I don't remember the date. It was like August 4th or August 5th. It was if it was that date or after, then they were in violation and it won't be eligible to play in the spring. So then we had the IHSA going back and forth with the Illinois Coaches Association, going back and forth with Prep Baseball Report, PBR. Um, and then Sean Duncan, who's the head of PBR, I don't know if he's out by you, he's a Midwest guy, saying, hey, look, if you're not going to allow these kids to play in these high level all-star games, we're going to start our own league. So I'm like, oh, that's great. So then the IHSA, if I remember correctly, gave in and said, okay, they're not ineligible. They're good to play in these games. There's no violation. But it went back and forth for about, it might have been even a week back and forth where these kids were going to be in violation because they played in this PBR All-Star Showcase. And these were the higher level kids. But I think, the IHSA gave in, thank God, because PBR is saying, okay, we're gonna start our own leagues and we're gonna take your best players in the spring. So the IHSA I ended up giving in, thank God, because we worry, and I'm sure you guys are in the same boat. I worry that club sports or travel sports are going to take over high school sports, and there's going to be
Yeah.
no more high school sports. I mean, really, the only sport that's protected, I would say, would be football.
Yeah.
But all the other sports, club and travel, they threaten high school sports and take some of our better athletes. So thank God that the IHSA and PBR worked that out, because that'd have been a nightmare.
Do you think that it would have been something where it incentivizes kids essentially not to play at their highest level? Like if you had a kid who made area code because as a junior he's throwing gas, or you've got a guy who's a switch hitter and he's just dropping bombs. Do you think that that kind of rule would incentivize kids to essentially not work as hard or not want to show off their talents just so they can play in the spring?
I think those special kids you're talking about, I think they still would have worked hard, but PBR is a business. They would have had salesmen out there telling them how many more benefits it would be to play in our PBR league versus your high school league. So that's what we would have been fighting. But I think those kids that are the high level kids, they're going to train and they're going to work hard, whether they were playing high school or PBR. On my case, selfishly, I don't want to lose those kids. I mean, if we do have
Yeah.
some of the, I don't want to lose those kids to PBR. I mean, you know, I I still think, maybe I'm old school. I still think the high school experience is a special experience that most kids are going to remember the rest of their life. And I don't want them to lose that. And selfishly, I don't want to lose those kids.
Yeah. No, and I think that high school teaches you to compete on a team because you see those guys who are really good showcase players,
Yeah,
uh, but they just can't compete in the
see that
spring.
every year. Every year we see that. Yep.
Yeah, because and my personal thought is it's easy to compete when you're playing once a week, but when you're tired and you've got a game Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or in Illinois' case, when you get rainouts and snowouts and hailouts,
Yes.
you might be playing five
Every
times.
day. There were 2 weeks last. We played 7 games in 6 days.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that'll show you who's really a baller
Yes.
because you're tired, you're
Yep.
not having fun. Even your starters, they have less rest now for the starting rotation, so you got to put some spot starts out there for long relief guys. That'll show you who really can play baseball.
And that's when I bring out the 162. I bring out the 162 speech saying, hey, at the big league level, they're playing every single day. Let me have a day off once every 3 weeks or so, but this is baseball. And I got to go into that conversation because I can see by Friday, Saturday, my guys are exhausted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's also it brings up another good point that that level of competition, it doesn't even matter about the level. You competing for not just yourself but other guys, competing for a team, trying to get wins for not just yourself but your buddies, your coach.
Yep.
I've never seen anybody cry over summer ball or high school ball, but I've seen plenty of players cry because their season ended, even if they're not a senior. I've seen sophomores cry because they feel like they let the team down, or they feel like they've been cut short
Yeah.
because that season matters so much to them. I
Yeah.
think that
That's a good point.
alone,
You see that in high school. You don't see that much in travel and club ball. That's true. Yes.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
because people get emotional over it, and that's I think that I always looked forward to spring ball far more than summer ball
Yep.
because spring was where you didn't get to pick your teammates essentially. So
Yep.
these were guys that you worked with all off season,
Correct.
and it was, I want to win, so I'm going to push you to be the best version that you can be, not just so, you know, I can get the W in the stat sheet. It's like
Yep.
we can get that W. We can have, a better community. We can bring some more pride, to the school.
Yes.
So, that's one thing where are you starting to see these kids, gravitate toward the showcase ball where, they're the 5 o'clock hitter, but when it comes to the game, they're hitting in the 3 spot, but they should really be hitting in the 8 or 9 spot. Or you've got guys who they're throwing 90 to 93, but they should be out of the bullpen because they're super wild when they start the games, but they go to the showcase and they just blow everybody away. That happens a lot here on the West Coast. You
Well, I
know,
love when we get those scouting reports, and sometimes we'll get them from PBR, Perfect Game, or wherever. This kid's a two, this catcher's a two flat to second base. He uses the whole, and you get the scouting report, and I get it. They have to sell their program, whether it's Perfect Game or PBR. But then you put the kid in a game that matters, and the kid is mentally weak, doesn't have an approach at the plate. When the game's on the line, doesn't play good defense. So, so as a high school coach, you see those kids in those moments that matter versus at a showcase where it's just a kid showing off his skill. He's not in a competitive environment where he has to perform when the game is on the line. That changes everything. So now the mental part of the game becomes a big part, and that kid's confident level and ability to compete at that high level when it really matters. So that's the separator.
yeah. And I think that your program does something unique where, at least when I was there every Wednesday in the wintertime, we got together and we went through the mental side of the game. We talked through that as a team.
Yes.
We would even talk about just like our biggest fear outside of baseball. Is
Yep.
that something you've still been implementing into the program?
Yeah, we still do that. We try to what we try to do now with our mental toughness lessons is we do them at the end of our workouts. So if we lift Monday, Wednesday, that last 15 minutes to 30 minutes, either it's through a video on mental toughness or a concept on mental toughness. Could be visualization, controlling the controllables, what your approach is in the on deck circle, what your approach is in between pitches or your routine. So now instead of doing it every Wednesday, and there's times I think, man, we need to go back to that. I still do those lessons. I just break them up now. We do them at the end of our Monday, Wednesday lifting sessions right now. Or once we get into November, December, then our open fields, which our open fields are our seniors led practices. In
Yeah.
November and December, we left Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I implement those at the end of our workout on Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Hmm.
You
And
can
then,
never do too much of that stuff. It's you're the biggest thing you're dealing with, and being a high school athlete and a college athlete, especially for a high school kid, their mentality and their confidence is like this. It's a roller coaster ride. So
yeah,
trying to get them to stay even keel and keep their confidence at one level and not drop too much or not get too high after a big win or a big performance. Just trying to keep them even keel for a high school kid when their mentality is a roller coaster ride, that's a big challenge.
yeah. No, and I think also it goes into the group that you had in 2015 and 2016. So my junior year and my senior year.
Mhm.
Our My junior year we went 30-5.
Yep.
My senior year we went 29-6. That group of people, we had a lot of talent on the bump for sure.
Yes.
And we had guys who they played hard on the field, but they weren't necessarily, I think my senior year we only had 3 or 4 guys going to college, including myself, and they were all POs.
Yeah.
But we still managed to win that many games. And it comes into,
Those 2 teams were all in for each other.
yeah.
They were all in.
So, yeah. So, how do you get guys to buy in like that? If you were sending a message to another coach who maybe they struggle with their team being more individuals versus, being one group playing for the same team, how do you get that level of buy in where guys still work hard on themselves, but they work even harder for the team?
What's that saying? That mudita, Mudita. What is that? Mudita. Be as excited and as joyful as you can for your teammate as you are for your own success. So we talk about that all the time. Being a good teammate, what that looks like in the dugout, on the field, in the weight room. We talk about it all the time. just trying to get kids to buy in that it's not all about you, because if we're all in for each other, um, it's amazing what you can accomplish. I still see use some of those quotes, but just trying to push, because we live in a selfish society. That's the society we live. So just being able to get kids to be excited for each other's success, and shoot, that starts in the weight room.
Yeah.
We had an open lift yesterday where I opened up on Fridays, even though we don't lift together on Fridays. I open it up if guys want to come in and lift on Fridays. Well, I think I had 15 freshmen and sophomores in there, because those are the guys that they don't get in the weight room as much as our older guys, because our older guys are also in strength class.
Yeah.
Those guys are in there getting all excited for a guy who's going for a max on a bench press, and they're all in there surrounded, hooting and hollering and getting jacked for this kid. I didn't say a word. That was all the kids doing that. So when the kids are excited for each other and they're excited for each other's success in the weight room, I think that carries over to the field and practice. So we're constantly talking about that, and it's tough. It's a challenge, and I say this every year, and I say it at meet the team night when all our parents come in. What you say to your son and how you talk to your son in the car or at dinner, and how you talk about the teammates or how you talk about the team or the coaches, is going to affect that young man's ability to be coached and that young man's ability to be a good teammate. So please be careful with what you say to your son. And I say that every year, and I know there's some parents that just do this, probably F you. And I don't care. I still talk about it. Just be careful with what you say to your sons, because we want these guys all rowing the boat in the same direction.
Hmm.
What you say can affect their attitude and our ability to do that.
Yeah. And then sort of shifting onto, how modern baseball is not right now, with all the analytics, with all the data, we have TrackMan data, hit tracks, all these things that can, help us pass the eye test. Essentially, if a guy comes in and nobody can touch his changeup or nobody can touch his slider,
Mm-hmm.
but the data says, well, that pitch could be better. This pitch is pretty average, but no one touches it.
Yeah.
How have you been able to handle or implement these analytics, these tools that we have now to help us in the game? How have you been able to handle that, implement that, but also keep your style of coaching and not dive too deeply into that? Or do you just completely ignore all that stuff all in all?
We've done a little bit with the hit tracks, because the GRB travel organization near us, which is one of the better organizations, that's the organization I always recommend to my guys, because all the guys that run that program are my former players. So I trust those guys, and they use the hit tracks. They use the rep Soto. They use some of that stuff, and then I'll get some data from them. I'm still old school. I don't do a lot of it. We never had that as a player, and even as a young coach, I never had that. But I'll listen to what those travel guys that are all my former players, like I said, that work on this stuff all off season. They do the plyo balls, they do the weighted balls, they do the running guns, all that stuff they do. I'll take their data and look at it. But like you said, the bottom line is, if they have all these showcase skills that are really good, but they can't get anybody out because they can't throw strikes, what good is it? So we got to have that kid that can also pitch and compete, and hit moments and be able to advance runners and get bunts down. So, those metrics are great. And I think those should be part of a kid's development, but it's not the entire package. You got to have those other things as well.
Yeah. Has it been difficult as time's gone on, from because when I started playing, in 2012 is when a lot of the weighted balls became a big thing, and then just chasing velocity was a massive thing when I first started.
Sure.
And obviously a lot of pitchers bought into that. Almost our entire pitching staff really bought into that, way of training.
Yes.
And I think that, Andy Dean, when he was the pitching coach, he was fantastic at being able to manage that kind of thing, where it was like, all right, we're going to do this, but we still need to work on the skill. We still need to learn, how to throw inside, how to spin the breaking ball, how to throw a 2-0 changeup. Has that evolved where it's getting a little bit more out of hand, where guys are starting to go like, no, coach, I need to throw harder. Like, the pitchability is like that'll be easy to come. I need to throw harder. Schools won't notice me. Has that been a conversation you've had to have with, because it's a little different when you've got a kid who throws 88 and maybe a school is like, we need you to hit 90 and you can play here. And again, that's a separate conversation for go where they want you to play. But if you have a kid who's throwing 80 to 82, and he's like, Coach, this weighted ball program, it's going to get me to 90. You know, is that a conversation you've been having more often compared to when I was playing in 2016 when I graduated?
Well, the guy you mentioned, Andy Dean, again, a former pitching coach of mine, former player who is your pitching coach, he runs that GRB program that I'm referring to. That's the guy that I give a lot of trust to working with a lot of our pitchers. And like you said, I think he does a great job with the plyo balls and the weighted balls and the velocity. They do a velocity program, but he also teaches kids how to pitch. So again, yes, the plyo ball work and the velo training has jumped up. Every travel organization is doing it now. We do it in our program. I think very similar, probably to when you were here. We do it in the mornings in January, February, with those kids that don't have access to it in their travel organization. We do it in the mornings with those kids. The kids that are already doing it, those kids, then we don't go through it. I have them do more of their positional stuff or maybe feel and touch stuff off the bullpen in the bullpen. Um, but it definitely has blown up as far as the velo training. And I think it's good for those kids that are juniors and seniors and closer to fully grown men. We don't do it with our freshmen, sophomores because they're still growing. And I'm always afraid they're going to get injured. And there has been kids that have gotten injured doing it before. So you just got to be careful and handle that with kit gloves.
Yeah.
And my pitching coaches over the years have done a really good job of communicating with all those kids and finding out exactly where you're at and who you're working with and what's your travel program doing and what's this travel program doing. And then we kind of adjust to that. But I like Coach Dean does. I think it's a part. I think it can improve your velo, but it's not everything. You have to make sure you learn how to pitch and
Mm-hmm.
learn how to throw that breaking pitch. I mean, did you see that Greg Maddux special on MLB yet?
Yeah, I did.
One of my favorite quotes with Maddux is when he got traded to the Braves and he was in the bullpen with some rookie pitchers. He said, "You know why I'm a millionaire? Because I can throw the fastball wherever I want." He
Yeah.
goes, "Do you know why I have a beach house in California? Because I can also change speeds." So I mean, there's two things right there. And a guy that was probably low 90s early in his career, but
Mm-hmm.
by the time he finished his career, he might have been 88 to 90, but he could throw the fastball with movement and he could change speeds with his breaking ball, and his changeup was devastating. Um, you still got to be able to pitch.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm assuming that your approach to, throwing inside has not changed.
Mhm.
We see more kids, and when we were playing, you were always like, look for the ball away because nobody's throwing inside.
Yeah,
But you told us you cannot pitch if you can't throw inside. That
absolutely.
was a mandatory thing.
Yep.
And at first, for me being an over the top guy,
Hmm.
that was hard for me to learn because everything I was taught was middle or away.
Sure.
But going through the program, I started to understand pitching inside makes batters uncomfortable.
Hmm.
But we still see guys who say, no, pitch outside, pitch outside, pitch outside. What is your philosophy to, why pitching inside is so important?
Well, I think pitching inside, like you said, makes hitters uncomfortable. I think it gets you a lot of ground balls, a lot of jam shot, weak ground balls back to the pitcher, third baseman, shortstop. Um, I think when a hitter sees a ball inside, their eyes get big. They think maybe they can handle it. But if you throw inside with conviction, you got a little bit of movement, and you can hit that consistently, what does that do for the outside part of the plate now?
Yeah, it opens it up.
Now, yeah, it opens it up. So I think even if you can just show inside and then go back away, I think that can be effective. If you can throw inside with some movement, holy cow. Not many high school kids are going to be able to handle that ball, that two seam in or that fastball in off the plate and be able to handle that and still get the barrel to the ball. There might be a couple, but there's not many. I think high
Yeah,
school really struggle with that. So, I mean, I think it's a twofold. You're gonna help your defense because you're going to get more weak ground balls. And then on the other end, being able to effectively throw inside is going to open up the outside part of the plate. I
yeah,
mean, what do we say? How do we get high school hitters out most of the time? Hard in, soft away. You
yeah,
go hard in, that opens up your breaking ball, that opens up your slider. So I think it's twofold. It's more weak balls are put in play, and it opens up the outside part of the plate.
yeah. And you're going to hit guys in the process too.
Yes,
And
100%.
yeah. And do players that you've had have that, understanding and buy in that it's like, okay, coach wants me to throw inside. there's going to be a couple games where maybe I beat like two kids.
Yep.
You know, is that, a conversation you've had to have with kids where it's like, hey, if you hit a kid when we call an inside pitch, that's fine. It
Yep.
happens. But obviously there has to be a level of working on that in the
Yep.
off season. So have you or your pitching coaches continued to shift with stand-ins, throwing inside and everything? Because when I was there, we used guys standing in and they hated it because
Yes.
yeah,
We hit a lot of guys, didn't we? I
yeah,
hate killing my own guys, especially the last 2 years when our numbers have been down and I haven't had a lot of guys. So I made an investment in those stand-ins. That's one of the best investments we made. So we no longer throw any bullpens without those stand-ins. And
yeah,
just like you said, if you hit a guy, my first response to my pitching guys, hey, were we trying to go in there? If we hit a guy trying to go in, okay. Obviously, with the bases loaded, we don't want to do that. Sometimes you have to. But my first question is, were we trying to go in? If we hit a guy trying to go in, okay. We hit a couple guys, 2, 3 guys a game, we can live with that. Obviously, we hit 5, 6 guys a game, especially with bases loaded situations. That turns into a nightmare. So
yeah,
that means you're going to work harder and harder on it in the bullpen and get these kids to be more confident to throw in the bullpen. But those stand-ins have been outstanding. We used to use our own guys, and we take out our own guys. We just can't do that anymore because we don't have as many players.
yeah,
It's hard on our own guys, even though offensively we want our guys to get hit and be able to tuck and turn and take that free base. But now those stand-ins have been, and we use them every day.
yeah. And something I've also implemented is if you see a guy, he throws perfect bullpens, no stand-in, just the catcher, controlled environment. There's nothing on the line, and obviously in high school there's no pitch clock.
Yep.
And I'm going from high school right now to the JUCO level where there is a pitch clock. Now it's a little different at JUCO. This clock starts the minute they hit the dirt.
Okay.
So they could walk around the mound if they wanted to get that extra time. Is the umpire going to get pissed? Probably.
Yeah.
But obviously they still have that constraint. But pitchers might struggle as soon as a batter gets in the box, regardless of how good they look in the bullpen, or even if there's just an umpire behind them.
Sure.
Have you been able to shift where, you've got a kid with a lot of talent, he looks amazing in the bullpen. As soon as the batter stands in the box or there's an umpire back there, all of a sudden everything looks like that to him. Do you guys adjust by putting someone back there, putting 2 stand-ins, 1 stand-in, or trying to make the environment less comfortable, like heckle pens where your guys get to, because nobody knows more about you than your teammates. Your teammates know everything about you, all the way
100%.
all the way up to your sister.
Yeah.
And guys do have a hard time with even just the heckling alone. Is that something you guys have implemented into the bullpens where, guy throws great with nobody there, all of a sudden someone comes in and it's just balls get sprayed everywhere, he's bouncing fastballs? Has that been something you've been able to implement, especially in the off season, because you throw in a gym, or when you throw live ABs, you're throwing in a cage. So you have no idea when a guy makes contact, if it's a pop out or a double. But at the end of the day, like, they still have to put it in play,
Yeah.
because that's one thing.
I love all that. Everything you said, I love. We use the double stand-in, so we'll put 2 in there. We'll put a guy behind there like an umpire. We'll have the heckle pens. We've done that before. We'll play horse where they have to execute a pitch, and then the next guy's got to execute a pitch, whether it's a fastball to a location or an off-speed pitch. I love all that. I think that's all great. And then the bottom line is it's like that 5 o'clock hitter that looks good in the cage and then he can't do crap in a game. Pitcher looks great in the pen, can't and doesn't execute in the game. That's an anxiety thing.
Yeah.
Then you got to work with a kid's breathing. You got to work with his pre-pitch routine. You got to start working more of the mental part of the game. But all that stuff is great. If you can make it more difficult and more challenging in that bullpen, whether it's heckle pens, whether it's a challenge pen, whatever it be, the double stand-ins, and then they get to the game out, it's easier. Hopefully that's going to translate.
Yeah. And I also think it's one thing. This is something that I implemented in high school, and I'm going to continue to implement into the JUCO level. Was I have the pitchers watch BP or some of the scrimmages where maybe they're using the machine during the tryout period.
Yeah.
And they know the exact location of the pitch. They know the exact speed. They've seen it 100 times, and they still ground out. They still pop up. They still swing and miss.
Yes.
And I try and tell pitchers, I'm like, dude, catchers, you got to set up middle for the majority of the at bat. Even if we're trying to go inside or outside, guys are going to miss spots. Guys
Yep.
look middle, they're going to hit the outside corner, they're going to hit the inside corner, the aim small, miss small type deal.
Right.
Because hitters get themselves out 2 out of 3 times. I mean, you were primarily a hitter. You know, how many times did you take your cookie pitch right down the middle, pop it up, swing and
Yep.
miss at it? And,
Absolutely.
you know, say you swing and miss, you foul it off, or you take it down the middle, you know, in your head, you're like, I'm not getting that pitch again.
Hmm.
So is that something you're able to preach to your pitchers where it's like, hey, watch BP before the game, even watch our guys. They're going to pop out, they're going to ground out. So there's no reason to not attack the strike zone, because there's times where it's like, you know, the just throw strikes thing that, you know, obviously no one's trying to walk guys,
Yep.
but I'll take a mound visit and I'll say, where are you trying to throw the ball? Well, I'm trying to hit the black. Well, it's 0-0. So I know you're not trying to throw strikes, or I know you're not trying to throw balls, but you're also not trying to throw a strike here. You're trying to
Hmm.
dance around them too much. You're giving them way too much credit. And that was something that you preached, where it was like, do not give the hitter too much credit.
Yep.
Sometimes the guy who's got that crazy pop, like when Aldridge was at the plate, he'd have games he went 0 for 3, 0 for 4.
Mhm.
Even if he was crushing it, you know, to center field, there's still a guy there.
Yep.
So is that something that guys have been able to still understand, and they buy into that? Or do you still have, or not still, but do you have issues with pitchers who, even though they understand if they throw the ball middle, or, you know, if you're trying to go inside, it doesn't have to be on the black, they still
Yep.
have a hard time understanding, like, okay, I can put this ball middle, get ahead, and have that in his mind that I dare you to hit it, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, wasn't it the Tampa Bay Rays that started taking their catcher and setting him up right over the middle of the plate? And
Mm-hmm.
said, we're setting up over the middle. We're going to let your stuff work. If it runs in, great. If it runs out, but we're going to set up. I think it was the Rays that started their catcher just set up right over the middle, and then they let their pitcher stuff work. Definitely, I think too many times our pitchers try to be too fine, or like you said, dancing around the zone, black to black. No, just set up over the middle. Trust your stuff. Let it work. Hitters going to get themselves out 7 out of 10 times. So
Yeah.
attack the zone, get ahead. If you don't get ahead, we can't pitch. Then they know what's coming. So at 100%.
Yeah. And then a couple of things I wanted to finish up on is, you know, modern baseball. We've seen the rules change so much, with pitch clock, with wider bases, pickoff limits.
Mhm.
Um, how do you feel about guys? You know, they're starting to get all sorts of crazy numbers with steals, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and somebody, I can't remember who it was, they told me that they should put an asterisk next to, you know, Acuna's record, put an
Mhm.
asterisk next to Otani's record, and basically put pitch clock era, just like it's possible we should put steroid era for some guys who hit all those home runs.
Sure.
How do you feel about these new? I mean, because when you're a spectator, it definitely makes the game a lot easier to watch, because it, you know,
Yeah.
the pitch is just a, you know, there's less guys stepping out. But from a player's perspective, if you're a hitter and you get buzzed up and in by a mid 90s fastball, you got to step right back in the box if you've already taken your time out.
Yeah.
But you don't have time to process the fact that, you just got buzzed right here,
Sure.
and now you can't step out. You got to
Yeah.
make contact, and the pitcher can just get right back on and throw to you, even if he throws it up and in again and makes you uncomfortable. Um, how do you feel about these new changes? Do you think that there should be an asterisk next to some of these? You know, because if you look at guys' stats pre-pitch clock and now post, you know, where we are now, how do you
Yeah.
feel about some of these changes with wider bases? Um, and do you ever think that you're going to see that implemented into the high school level?
Shoot. I think so. Shoot. I went to a minor league game, a AAA game down in Nashville, and they had the box, and the hitter could step out and say that wasn't a strike. And I think they have the camera in center field, and they disputed the call and the call got overturned. So I think it's heading. It's probably going to get to college level first, and then high school level. But I think it's heading that way. Um, I wasn't I didn't think I'd be a fan of the clock, but I think it's sped the game up. And as a coach and from a pitching perspective, I want that game to have pace. I mean, we've been talking about that for years because when that game has pace, the defense is more in the moment. Nobody has a chance to let their mind wander. The hitter doesn't have a chance to let his mind wander when he just got buzzed at 95 at his chin. So you have to now play with some pace. And I think that helps the offense and the defense stay more in the moment because baseball with those lulls in the game, your mind can wander, and then sometimes that can affect your defense. It can affect your confidence. So I think it's been a good thing. As far as the base stealing goes, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? If this guy can only pick twice, thank you. Now I know, hey, I'm going to draw those pick throws. Now I know when to go. Um, and then as far as the asterisks in the stat books or in the history books, the game evolves. Every game has evolved. I've been saying this for years. Steroids save baseball. You want to put an asterisk next to those guys that hit all those home runs during the steroid era? Well, what about the guys in the 60s and 70s that were all hyped up on speed and amphetamines just to get through the 162 game season? So, um, steroids save baseball because after the 94 strike, nobody was watching baseball.
Yeah.
So whether the MLB knew what was going on or not, that was a part of the history of the game. Those guys still had to hit the ball, and I know they were bigger and stronger, but they still had to hit the baseball.
Yeah.
So I think it was just part of the game. And now the new part of the game is this clock and what it's done. So, I think every sport evolves. Look at what's going on in the NFL now with no kickoff returns, and now they're getting
Yeah.
the ball. I mean, that's the game. The game evolves. So I'm not a fan of the asterisks, but I think going back to the pitch clock, now the game has pace. Your pitchers are working faster. There's less time for the kids, for our players now to think about things, which is going to screw up their next pitch or screw up their next pitch in a bat. So I didn't think I was going to be a fan of it, but I definitely am.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think there could be some risk to the pitch clock unless you give a step off rule where they can get, unlimited step offs, or
Sure.
maybe they increase it from, because, by pick 3, they have to get the guy out or he gets the next bat.
Right.
The pitch clock being at high school could maybe potentially, hurt arms. And it could, because there are times where you got to step off, take a breath, and a deep, big
100%. I agree with that.
base
Yeah.
is
100%.
juiced, you got to take a breath, and maybe you do that, you get a violation. It's an automatic ball for you. The pitcher gets, or the hitter gets a ball.
Yeah.
Do you think if it's implemented into high school, you might start seeing some more injuries in that way?
Yeah, so you might have to adjust our training, and as far as our that pace of pitch is going to have to be implemented in the bullpen, which we've done a little bit of, but it's going to have to be definitely be a priority if that clock comes down to high school. Our games are 7 innings, so
Yeah.
normally our games are 2 hours. I mean, hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the pace of game. But there are games that go 2.5, 3 hours sometimes that get ugly. That clock wouldn't be such a bad thing. But I think, yeah, I definitely think it would have to affect the training in the bullpen and the training of your pitchers as far as, hey, we got to go. We got to get it and go. Um, their bodies are going to have to adjust to that. The conditioning is going to have to adjust to that. So I definitely think it can make an impact.
Hmm. No, that's great. And I think that's a good place to end the podcast on. But where I'll leave it off is, if you have a message you could send out to these high school players or these guys who are in high school and they're transitioning into college ball or trying to get that scholarship, what
Mhm.
would be that advice you want to send them for the kids who are listening in right now?
I think enjoy your high school experience because you're never getting it back. And there's a different vibe when you're competing with the guys you grew up with in your community. That's a special thing. When we play for a state championship here in Illinois, and I know California does the same thing, and you have a chance to compete with your buddies for a championship, be able to lift that trophy. I think that's a special thing, and that's something that's difficult to repeat. I think in travel ball, or in fall ball, or in summer. I think the spring is a little bit more special because every game is meaningful, which means every inning and every pitch can be meaningful. And I think when you play a lot of games like we do in the summer, I think you lose that. So I think just enjoy your high school experience because you'll never get it back.
No, I think that's a great place to end it on. So, um, thank you for coming on, and we'll have to have you as a
My
guest
pleasure.
back.
Yeah, that was great, Joe. Outstanding. Loved it.
All right, guys. Well, welcome to that last episode, and stay fearless.